From the land grant University in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, this is the Closing Market Report. It is the 8th day of April 2024. I'm Extension's Todd Gleason. Coming up, we'll talk about the commodity markets with Curt Kimmel. He's at agmarket.net. Frayne Olson from North Dakota State University Extension will be here to discuss the prospective plantings report and how acreage might change, especially in his part of the world, and maybe a shift to corn. We'll know more in a bit. And then, as we close out our time together, we'll discuss the weather forecast too with Mark Russo at EverStream Analytics, all on this Monday edition of the Closing Market Report. Click and play us from our website at willag.org or look us up in your favorite podcast applications.
Todd Gleason services are made available to WILL by University of Illinois Extension.
May corn for the day at $4.35 a penny and a quarter higher. July $4.47 up 3/4, and December a half cent higher. That's the new crop at $4.73. May soybeans $11.81 down 3.5. July 2.5 lower at $11.94 1/4, and November beans $11.84 1/4 down a half cent. Bean meal futures up $2.90. The bean oil down 99 cents. Wheat futures in the soft red. The July a penny and a quarter lower at $5.80.5. The hard red July at $5.84.5, up 5 cents for the afternoon. Live cattle futures finished $1.27.5 higher. Feeders were down $1, and lean hogs were up 2.5 cents. Crude oil around 48 cents lower at $86.44 a barrel. The gasoline on the RBOB down 4 1/10 cent to $2.74 6/10 cent, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average around 28 points higher at this hour. We're now joined by Curt Kimmel. He's at agmarket.net to discuss what happened in Chicago. Good Monday for the eclipse day to you, Curt. Thanks for being with us.
Well, good afternoon. Glad to be here. It's quite an event here, as most of the attention has been toward what's going to happen in the sky here this afternoon.
Indeed it has. But we probably ought to talk about what's happened in Chicago. Anything really of importance to discuss, or did it just kind of trade along today and move sideways?
This sideways, I was really surprised. I think a lot of the traders are focused on some other things. Going home Friday there was concern about the bird flu news items. There was concern about Iran and Israel going into the weekend. Little, weather events around the world and so forth. And coming in here Sunday evening through today, it was just eclipse quiet for some reason. And I think we're kind of in a situation now. Maybe you can see a little action here as we get a little closer to the crop report as traders kind of square away positions on that report on Thursday. We did see export inspections report shipped out 55.9 million bushels of corn. That was at the upper end of trade expectations. And we shipped out about 17 million bushels of soybeans. And that was quite in line with what they were looking for. Weather-wise, I'm locally here. I dumped out an inch of rain over the weekend, but we were fairly dry. Visiting with producers clear across the Midwest, it seems like that Iowa region's going here today. They a little shortchanged. Then, too, when you look at the upper northeastern corner of Iowa, they were fairly fortunate to receive some timely rain. So that's going to help them tremendously. This afternoon's planting progress report, we're going to see the corn plantings be about 4% complete as a nation. The forecast is warmer here as we move forward, so it won't take long to dry out and warm up and kind of giddy up here, Todd.
As we wait for these Thursday reports, just the WASDE numbers, the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates, really will be, I suppose, mostly about what USDA does as it's related to any adjustments to either the corn and soybean numbers out of Brazil and Argentina. Are there expectations?
Yeah, just some slight changes in through here. The average trade gas for corn carryouts 2.102. Last month, we were at 2.172, down 70 million bushels. And that's a combination of a few things. Probably still the unknowns, feed use, but ethanol use is strong. Exports are strong. We're shipping out a lot of corn. basis is actually firmed up in corn. So corn demand is relatively firm. Soybean side about unchanged. 317 million bushels average trade estimate. We were at 315 last month. It's going to be jockeying around. You're going to see a drop in exports, but you're going to see a bump up in domestic crush. As we move more towards the middle of the month here, the NOPA crush report's expected to come out as strong again. So we'll continue to watch that theme of higher crush numbers, lower export numbers.
Are there any technical notes that we need to be watching at this time?
It seems like we're following this 20-day moving average or above or below it, where some of the commodities are bumping up against it. If we can poke through that, I think we'll be in a position to have a little giddy up. Seasonally and through here, we do see some price strings, but on the corn chart, we're virtually sideways in through here. We're kind of building a wedge formation. If we find a little positive news to generate the green line above the red line, stay there for a while, hopefully we can start to see the commodity funds cover a little bit more of their short position. Soybeans are just trading sideways. This low we saw last week was sort of a key support level we need to stay above. So if we stay above that and start making some higher highs, but it just feels like the market's just going to consolidate sideways until we see if Thursday's news can generate some buying or selling interest. Either way there, Todd.
Okay, thank you much. I appreciate it.
You bet. Take care.
You too. That's Curt Kimmel. He's with agmarket.net. Joined us here on the Closing Market Report for this Monday afternoon. You may find and listen to him again on our website at willag.org. Just click and play right there on the website on demand anytime you'd like, or look us up in your favorite podcast applications, places like Apple and Spotify. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. Frayne Olson, agricultural economist at North Dakota State University Extension in Fargo, now joins us. Hi, Frayne. Thank you very much for being with us. How's the weather in your area? Has spring sprung yet?
Not quite. It for most of the winter, I think everybody's pretty optimistic we're going to have an early start. We had essentially above average temperatures and we had below average snowfall, so we didn't have a lot of snow melt. But then as we got closer to spring, all of a sudden it flipped back and it said, no, we're not done with winter yet. So we are headed into the next week or so, into some much warmer temperatures. We'll be back into above average. We're getting a little bit of rain showers, some system coming through here now. And so at least we have enough topsoil moisture to get everything kind of worked up and out of the ground. After that, we still have some drier conditions across the state. So we are there's in particular in the northeast corner of the state, we're going to have some anxious people coming up in a few weeks. We're going to need some more rain showers to finish this thing off. But right now we're sitting pretty good. I think we will get in the field on at least at an average time. Not necessarily faster than normal, but at least we'll be there kind of on average.
Well, on that note, a couple of things. It feels like we are now in the winter doldrums, which is, it's not an odd time. It does happen at this time of the year between the prospective plantings reports and really the USDA May numbers, which are a report that includes the crop that will be put in the ground this season. On that note, the prospective plantings reports to the June acreage reports. Have you been thinking about if and could there be changes in the acreage?
Yeah, that's one of the things is I've kind of finishing up my spring marketing talks with farmers and asking questions about how they're finalizing their planting intentions. One of the things that comes up in the discussion a little bit, and I caution people about this, is, I've been, number one, doing this long enough, and I know how, in general, farmers think that if you get a nice early spring, even though it's a little bit on the dry side, you get an early spring, everything's going smooth. What do you do with corn and, like in our area, spring wheat acres? And I ask the question, and everybody kind of smirks and says, yeah, we keep going a little longer. At least you run till the seed is out, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, depending upon, again, the weather conditions. But if we have good planting progress, if seed's going in the ground really fast, I would not be surprised to see a few more corn and possibly some more spring wheat acres put in the ground this spring than what the initial prospective plantings report said. So obviously we won't get any of those revised numbers until June. And we'll probably be talking about that again a little bit at that time period. But I just want to caution everybody that like I said, I've been doing this long enough, and the temptation is, if everything's going well and you got some seed left over, you might as well just put it in the ground, and then before you switch over to beans or you switch over to some of the other row crops. So I'm kind of in the back of my head thinking, yeah, we'll get a cutback in corn, but it may not be as big as what we had originally thought. So we'll wait to see.
Extra acres, or will they be soybean acres that get switched to corn?
Well, that's a great question, because again, when you look back historically at where do we come up with more acres, or those years where we had kind of bigger shifts between the prospective plantings report and the acreage reports. It usually is because of prevent plant. You have a spring that looked like it was going to be good and all of a sudden turned really wet, or you coming into the spring and it was exceptionally wet and you just don't know how many acres and how quickly farmers would switch and either switch crops or eventually just stop planting. Or we had a year where, like up here in 2011, when we had very, very high levels of prevent plant, and all of a sudden coming back into 2012, we had a much drier season. And all those, not all, but most of those prevent plant acres came back into production. So those, if you look historically, that's typically where we see those big shifts from a prospective plantings report into an acreage report. However, this year, I don't think we're going to see that. I mean, last year was a relatively dry year in kind of that area of the prairie pothole region where we tend to get these big flips in acres because of prevent plant. Last year, at least in North Dakota, we planted almost every acre available, and I expect that to happen again this year. So I don't necessarily think that it's going to be new acres coming in or acreage that could be planted that was not intended. I do think it might be more of a shifting between corn and beans or between corn and some other crops. So, when in doubt, farmers love to grow corn. It's a fun crop to grow, and it's just handling the bushels, even though it can be a headache at times, is still a lot more fun than handling something with lower yields. So, I'm not saying that will happen, but it is something, and I am kind of keeping my eye on it. I think.
Turn your attention to the grain stocks report as well. When you looked at it, I'm sure you looked to see what on-farm storage in North Dakota might be. For corn and soybeans, did it concern
you? Indirectly, yes, it did. There was not so much on the soybean side, but more on the corn side. For both. We have some pretty large numbers of on-farm left in the bin, and I know that basically just verified some of the conversations that I had with farmers throughout the meeting season. That most of them had been a little more aggressive in soybean sales, and up here, at least in the northern plains, we're very dependent upon the export market, in particular that PNW market, which tends to be the Asian destinations. And they, up here, we've gotten used to being able to try and get our beans pushed through the system relatively early in the season. So there wasn't a lot of soybeans left. At least from my perspective. But for the corn and wheat, we do have some. And that is a bit concerning. I know there's a lot of farmers kind of worried about, current price levels. How long will they last? Am I going to have another chance to be able to get some of this stuff moved through the pipeline? I know the lenders actually were as concerned as most farm managers were, simply because inventories impact not only your inventory values in your balance sheet, but then as you look forward and doing the price forecasting for 2024, lower commodity prices also kind of had an impact there. So I had as many calls from ag lenders as I did from farmers saying, boy, when are we going to get a rebound, or are we going to get a recovery, and what might that be? And it had to do primarily with those inventory numbers. It's going to take us a while to kind of chew through this backlog, and up here in the northern plains, we're in the same boat as a lot of others across the nation.
What's the confidence level at this point about the opening of new soybean processing facilities, and or those that have already opened, broken ground, or are planned? Are you as hopeful as you were last fall?
Yes. Yes and no. Tricky question. So we have 3 plants that are either operating or planned. We have a plant just outside of Jamestown, North Dakota, which is owned by ADM. That plant has been started operations last fall. They started contracting and delivering last fall. They have been receiving grain and have been crushing, kind of fits and starts. They've had a pretty good run here. There have been some, I think, kinks in getting everything. It's a brand new facility. I think getting everything all shaken down and running as efficiently as they wanted to. But they have been crushing beans for several months now, and it seems to be going relatively smoothly. We have a facility just outside of Fargo here, a small town called Castleton. It's only about 80 miles away from the ADM facility, so they're very close to each other logistically. That plant is currently contracting. Their intention is to be up and running by harvest of 2024 and be receiving beans. I just talked to one of their procurement people here a few days ago, and they're still on track to have everything completed and the plant up and running and ready to go. There is a third plant that's currently in the planning phase. It's in Grand Forks, North Dakota, which would be straight north of Fargo, nearer the Canadian border. That facility is still in the planning stages. So they have been revising some of their business plans. They've got some investment capital. They've purchased some land, but they're not. They're a little ways off yet on any kind of construction plans. And so we'll have to wait to see as we move forward how that rolls out and how quickly that rolls out. I do know on a national level that there have been some projects that have kind of put their projects on hold just because crushing margins now over the last several months has gotten much thinner. And so it's a matter of timing and anticipating when you'll be able to get back to profitability. So we'll have to wait to see on the third plant on what the timeline is for that one. I haven't heard anything definite yet, but they are still moving forward, and they're still planning to move to construction as soon as possible.
One other thing, and I had conjectured about this, that the plants were contracting for soybeans to get producers to provide them enough in these areas. I know Castleton and Jamestown are only 80 miles apart. Jamestown is about 2 hours due west of Fargo, where you are. Mm-hmm. I had made note that the county there had it popped up in the USDA numbers as a large soybean producing county. That's not been the case in the past, I don't believe. What was lost in that transition?
Primarily wheat acres. There were some barley acres that were lost, but primarily spring wheat acres. So that region. So a couple things. When you look at the county listings of the kind of the highest producing counties in the country, both Cass County, North Dakota, which is where we are in Fargo, as well as the Castleton plant, and then Stutzman County, which is the Jamestown area that you referenced earlier. Those are two very large counties by land area. They're also very heavily agricultural dominated. And so just because they're large counties, we got a lot of farmland in those areas. The bushel counts get to be pretty high when you look at it in absolute bushel terms. But the transition, and this has been going on for several years, the transition really has been out of wheat and barley and much more into the corn and beans, with beans being exceptionally popular just because of the kind of the agronomic conditions and the fact that we made a little bit more quicker advances in the soybean genetics than we have in the corn genetics. And in fact, just on a sidebar trivia, the facility that ADM purchased to convert over to their soybean crushing plant was actually a former Cargill barley malting plant. So they basically stripped out all of the malting barley equipment, but kept most of the storage capacity, and obviously it's right along one of the main line railroads, and so they had access to rail as well as interstate, so it was a very good location, had a lot of good water source, but they stripped out all of the malting barley capacity, and then they rebuilt and added on for the soybean crushing capacity. So we're taking the same facility, or a lot of the same facility, and we're switching it from barley processing into soybean processing because of the shift in acres.
Hey, thank you for taking time with me today.
Always a pleasure. I enjoy visiting.
It is. I appreciate it. That, of course, is Frayne Olson. He is an agricultural economist with North Dakota State University Extension and is located in Fargo. Mark Russo now joins us to take a look at the weather forecast. He is at EverStream Analytics. Hi on this Monday to you, Mark. Thanks for being with us. A little sunshine today in parts of the path, I suppose, maybe more than a little bit of it, of the eclipse. What are people able to see and not see where today?
Yeah, well, Todd, here in Illinois, Indiana, overall, pretty good viewing conditions here, especially in areas of the path of totality. Just some very high, patchy cirrus clouds here coming in over the next hour or two, and that's been that way throughout much of the day. But all in all, pretty good conditions here, and we're very lucky here with the timing, because there's other parts of the U.S. Where there's more abundant cloud cover and not as good viewing conditions.
Yeah, so some of our primary regions have already reached totality and it's been passed, and others will soon see it so as it moves northward across the United States. So thank you for covering that. Now, let's talk about planting here in the United States and weather across the Midwest in general. What are you seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing over the next couple of weeks a pattern that should allow for generally normal planting progress. There's going to be some rain at times, also some drier conditions, but we're not seeing anything extremely wet. Now, some of the wettest areas here in the short term will be the Delta and on into the eastern Corn Belt, especially coming up later on tomorrow and then Wednesday, Thursday as a storm system tracks across the region. But that's going to be followed up by numerous days of drier weather. And all in all here, like the most favorable part of the Corn Belt will be the Western Belt and even up into the Northern Plains, where it's still kind of early, but that's where the least amount of precip is going to be here over the next 2 weeks.
And finally, what do you think about conditions in South America?
Yeah, in South America, for Brazil safrinha, it's an improving mode in terms of conditions over the next couple of weeks. We've already seen that improvement across center-west Brazil, the biggest corn-producing area, where rain activity has been widespread over the past week to 10 days. But now the southern belt, which has been dry lately, they're going to be involved as well in and around the state of Paraná. So with more rain, with rain activity increasing there, then that will allow for a continued improvement in conditions as we move into the middle portion of April.
Hey, thank you much.
You're welcome, Todd.
Mark Russo is with EverStream Analytics, joined us here on the Closing Market Report from Illinois Public Media. It is public radio for the farming world. Find us online, listen to us on demand anytime you'd like at willag.org, willag.org. Just click and play from the website or look us up in your favorite podcast applications. Places like Apple and Spotify and Amazon Music, Pandora, Audible, and many, many more, including the new YouTube Music podcast application. The theme music for the Closing Market Report is written, performed, and produced by Logan County, Illinois farmer Tim Gleason. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason.